The Saudi Arabian desert stretched endlessly under the scorching sun when billionaire Sheikh Abdullah al-Rashid saw something that would haunt him forever. A small figure was kneeling in the sand, barely visible against the vast dunes. As his luxury car got closer, Abdullah realized it was a young black girl, maybe 10 years old, holding a baby and begging for water. She was alone in one of the world's most dangerous deserts, with no shelter, no food, and no hope of survival. What Abdullah didn't know was that this little girl had survived something terrible. She had witnessed horrors that would break most adults, yet she had found the courage to escape and protect her baby brother. But her nightmare wasn't over. The people who had hurt her family were still hunting her, and they would stop at nothing to find her. What started as a rescue mission would become a desperate race across the desert, with lives hanging in the balance. The girl's story of survival and love would change Abdullah's life forever. If you're someone who appreciates emotional stories, we'd love for you to like and subscribe. There's more to come that might move you too. The morning sun was already burning hot over the Saudi Arabian desert when 10-year-old Amara clutched her baby brother closer to her chest and took another painful step across the endless sand. Her bare feet were cut and bleeding from 3 days of walking through the harsh terrain, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Her little brother's life depended on her finding help. Baby Khalil was only 8 months old, and he had been crying weakly for hours. Amara knew he was dying of thirst and hunger, just like she was. Her lips were cracked and swollen, her throat felt like sandpaper, and her small body was trembling from exhaustion. But every time she felt like collapsing, she looked down at Khalil's tiny face and found the strength to keep going. Amara and her family were originally from Ethiopia. Her parents, Desta and Marin, had come to Saudi Arabia 2 years ago, looking for work and a better life for their children. Desta had found a job working construction for a wealthy businessman, while Marin cleaned houses in the city. They lived in a small apartment with other immigrant families, sending most of their money back to relatives in Ethiopia, while saving what little they could for their children's future. But 6 months ago, everything had gone wrong. Desta had been badly injured in a construction accident that wasn't his fault, but his employer refused to pay for medical treatment or provide compensation. Without income and facing mounting medical bills, the family had been forced to borrow money from dangerous people, loan sharks who charged impossible interest rates and used violence to collect their debts. The debt had grown larger every month, no matter how hard Desta and Marin worked once he recovered. When they couldn't make the payments, the threats began. Phone calls in the middle of the night, men following Marin to work, notes left under their door warning them about what would happen if they didn't pay. 3 nights ago, those threats had become reality. Amara had been sleeping on a thin mattress with baby Khalil when she heard her parents arguing in hushed, frightened voices with strangers who had broken into their apartment. The men spoke Arabic, which Amara understood a little, and they were demanding payment of a debt that had grown to over 50,000 Saudi riyals, money her family could never hope to earn. "Please," she had heard her father beg, "give us more time. We will pay everything, but we need more time." "Time is up," one of the men had replied coldly. "You pay now, or you pay with your lives." When her parents couldn't produce the money, the men had forced the entire family into the back of a truck and driven them deep into the desert, far from any roads or settlements. Amara had tried to stay calm for Khalil's sake, but she was terrified. She had heard stories about people who disappeared in the desert and were never seen again. The kidnappers had set up a crude camp among the sand dunes, with tents and vehicles hidden from view. They told Desta and Marin they would be held until the debt was paid, but Amara could see in the men's eyes that they had no intention of letting her family go alive. On the second night in the desert, Amara had awakened to the sound of gunshots. She had crawled to the edge of her tent and seen something that would haunt her nightmares forever. Her parents were lying motionless on the sand, and the kidnappers were standing over them with smoking guns. "The children are next," she heard one man say. "We'll wait until morning." Terror gave Amara a strength she didn't know she possessed. While the killers slept, she carefully picked up baby Khalil, wrapped him in the only blanket she could find, and crept out of the camp into the darkness of the desert. She had no food, no water, and no idea which direction to go. All she knew was that she had to get as far away from the killers as possible and somehow find help before they discovered she was gone. For 3 days and 2 nights, Amara had been walking through the desert with Khalil. She had tried to travel at night when it was cooler and rest during the day in whatever shade she could find, but there was no escape from the brutal heat and thirst. On the first day, she had found a small amount of dirty water collected in a rocky depression, which she had given to Khalil drop by drop from her finger. But that water was long gone now, and both children were getting weaker by the hour. Khalil had stopped crying that morning. which scared Amara more than his tears had. He was barely moving, and his breathing was shallow and rapid. She knew that babies died quickly from dehydration, and she was desperate to find help before it was too late. The sun was now directly overhead, making the sand so hot it burned her feet, even through the calluses she had developed. Amara could see heat waves shimmering in the distance, making the horizon dance and waver like a mirage. She stumbled and fell to her knees, still holding Khalil protectively against her chest. For a moment, she was tempted to just lie down in the sand and wait for death to take them both. The pain of thirst and exhaustion was overwhelming, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to take another step. But then Khalil made a soft sound, not quite a cry, but a weak whimper that reminded Amara that her baby brother was counting on her. She looked down at his tiny face, dark skin burned by the sun and lips parched from dehydration, and she found her resolve again. "I won't let you die," she whispered to him in Amharic, her native language. "I promised Mama and Papa I would take care of you." Amara struggled back to her feet and continued walking, though every step was agony. She had no idea if she was going in the right direction or just walking deeper into the vast emptiness of the desert. But she kept moving because stopping meant death for both of them. In the distance, she thought she heard something that made her heart race with hope, the sound of an engine. She squinted against the bright sun and saw what looked like a vehicle moving across the desert, still far away, but definitely real. Amara began waving her free arm and calling out, though her voice was so hoarse from thirst that barely any sound came out. She stumbled forward as fast as her exhausted legs could carry her, praying that whoever was in the vehicle would see her and stop. The car, a large, expensive-looking SUV, was moving in her general direction, but seemed to be following some kind of route that might take it past her without the driver noticing a small girl in the vast expanse of sand. Desperation gave Amara a final burst of energy. She climbed to the top of the nearest sand dune, making herself as visible as possible, and waved both arms above her head while still holding Khalil securely. "Help!" she cried in Arabic, using one of the few words she knew in that language. "Help us!" For a terrifying moment, it seemed like the vehicle would continue past without seeing her. But then the SUV slowed, stopped, and began turning in her direction. Amara collapsed to her knees in relief and exhaustion, clutching Khalil and watching as their salvation approached through the shimmering heat of the desert. Inside the air-conditioned comfort of his custom Mercedes G-Wagon, Sheikh Abdullah al-Rashid was thinking about his upcoming business meetings in Riyadh when something caught his eye in the distance. At first, he thought it might be an animal or a piece of debris, but as he got closer, he realized with shock that it was a child. Abdullah was a 42-year-old billionaire who had built his fortune through oil investments, real estate development, and technology ventures. He was one of the wealthiest men in Saudi Arabia, with palaces, private jets, and luxury cars around the world. But despite his privileged life, he was known for his generosity and his commitment to helping those less fortunate. When Abdullah saw the small figure collapsed on the sand dune, his first instinct was to help. He immediately directed his driver to approach the location, and as they got closer, the situation became clear and heartbreaking. It was a young black girl, probably around 10 years old, holding what appeared to be an infant. Both children looked like they were on the verge of death from exposure and dehydration. "Stop the car," Abdullah ordered his driver. "Quickly!" Abdullah jumped out of the air-conditioned vehicle into the blazing heat and ran to where Amara was kneeling in the sand. Up close, he could see how dire the situation was. The girl's lips were cracked and bleeding. Her eyes were sunken from dehydration, and the baby in her arms was barely breathing. "Please," Amara whispered in broken Arabic, looking up at Abdullah with desperate eyes. "Water. Baby needs water." Abdullah's heart broke at the sight of these two children suffering in the desert. Without hesitation, he scooped Amara and Khalil into his arms and carried them to his vehicle, where he immediately gave them small sips of cool water from his personal supply. As the life-saving liquid touched their lips, Abdullah realized that this was only the beginning. These children had survived something terrible, and there might be people looking for them who meant them harm. What Abdullah didn't know was that at that very moment, the men who had killed Amara's parents were realizing that their young prisoners had escaped, and they were already beginning their hunt across the desert to find them. Inside the blessed coolness of Abdullah's Mercedes, Amara felt like she had been transported to heaven. The air conditioning was a miracle after 3 days in the scorching desert heat, and the leather seats felt softer than any bed she had ever known. But most importantly, there was water. Precious, life-giving water that Abdullah was carefully giving to her and baby Khalil, drop by drop. "Slowly, little one," Abdullah said gently in Arabic, then switched to English when he saw Amara's confused expression. "Drink slowly. Too much too fast will make you sick." Amara nodded weakly and took small sips from the water bottle while trying to give Khalil tiny amounts from her finger. The baby's lips were so dry and cracked that the water seemed to disappear immediately. But after a few minutes, his breathing became less labored. Abdullah watched the children with growing concern and amazement. The girl couldn't be more than 10 years old, yet she had somehow managed to keep herself and an infant alive in the desert for days. Her protective instincts toward the baby were remarkable, and even now, when she was clearly dying of thirst herself, she was making sure the infant got water first. "What is your name?" Abdullah asked softly in English. "Amara," the girl replied, her voice still hoarse from dehydration. "This is Khalil. He is my brother." "Where did you come from, Amara? Where are your parents?" At the mention of her parents, Amara's eyes filled with tears, and she held Khalil closer to her chest. "They are dead," she said simply. "Bad men killed them." Abdullah felt a chill run down his spine despite the heat outside. Bad men. Who were these men? Amara was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with traumatic memories. "Men my father owed money to," she said finally. "They took us to the desert. They killed Mama and Papa at night. I ran away with Khalil." Abdullah's driver, Hassan, glanced back with concern in his eyes. He had been working for Abdullah for 15 years and had seen many things, but the sight of these two nearly dead children had shaken him. "Sir," Hassan said quietly in Arabic, "we should get them to a hospital immediately." Abdullah nodded. "Yes, but carefully. If what the girl says is true, there may be dangerous people looking for them." Abdullah pulled out his satellite phone and called his personal physician, Dr. Khalil al-Mansouri, who had a private clinic in a small town about 2 hours away. "Doctor, I have an emergency," Abdullah said when the call connected. "2 children, severe dehydration, possibly other injuries. I'm bringing them to your clinic immediately." "Of course, Your Highness," Dr. al-Mansouri replied. "I'll prepare everything." As Hassan drove toward the clinic, Abdullah continued to care for the children. He had his driver's emergency medical kit and was able to clean some of Amara's cuts and wounds while she held Khalil. The girl was incredibly brave, barely making a sound even when cleaning her injuries must have been painful. "Amara," Abdullah said as he bandaged a deep cut on her foot. "Can you tell me more about the men who hurt your family? What did they look like?" Amara described the kidnappers as best she could. 3 men with beards, driving old pickup trucks, carrying guns. They spoke Arabic and seemed to know the desert well. They had talked about selling children to recover their money if the parents couldn't pay. Abdullah felt sick hearing this. He knew that human trafficking was a serious problem in the region. With criminal organizations that preyed on poor immigrant families, these men were probably part of a larger network that used violence and kidnapping to control people who couldn't pay their debts. "Amara, do you remember which direction you came from when you were walking in the desert?" Abdullah asked. The girl pointed toward the southeast, which was where some of the most remote and lawless areas of the desert were located. It was a region where criminals often operated without fear of law enforcement because it was so far from civilization. Abdullah made another phone call, this time to his head of security, Colonel Faisal al-Zahra, a former military officer who managed safety for all of Abdullah's properties and business operations. "Colonel, I need you to prepare a security team immediately," Abdullah said. "I'm transporting 2 children who have escaped from kidnappers. The criminals may be looking for them." "Understood, Your Highness. How many men do you need?" "Enough to ensure these children are completely safe." "And contact Inspector Mahmoud at the police. We'll need to report this crime and coordinate with law enforcement." As they drove through the desert, Abdullah found himself deeply moved by Amara's story and her courage. This little girl had witnessed her parents' murder, escaped from killers, and survived in the desert for 3 days while protecting an infant. Her strength and determination were extraordinary. Baby Khalil was slowly responding to the fluids and cool air. His breathing was becoming more regular, and he even opened his eyes briefly to look around. Amara smiled for the first time since Abdullah had found her, seeing that her brother was getting better. "He's going to be okay," Abdullah assured her. "You saved his life by getting him out of the desert. I promised Mama I would take care of him," Amara said quietly. "Before the bad men came, she told me to always protect Khalil." Abdullah felt tears forming in his eyes. This child had been through more trauma than most adults ever experienced, yet she was focused entirely on her responsibility to her baby brother. They were about an hour away from the clinic when Hassan noticed something in his rearview mirror that made him tense. "Your Highness," Hassan said carefully, "we may have a problem. There are 2 vehicles following us, and they've been maintaining the same distance for the past 20 minutes. Abdullah turned to look through the rear window and saw 2 old pickup trucks in the distance, exactly matching the description Amara had given of the kidnappers' vehicles. "How could they have found us so quickly?" Abdullah wondered aloud. Amara, who had been dozing in the cool air, suddenly became alert when she heard the tension in the men's voices. "What's wrong?" she asked. Abdullah didn't want to frighten her, but he needed to know if she recognized the vehicles. "Amara, can you look behind us and tell me if you see anything familiar?" The girl carefully turned in her seat and looked through the rear window. When she saw the two pickup trucks, her face went white with terror. "Those are them," she whispered. "Those are the bad men's cars." Abdullah's jaw tightened with determination. These criminals had murdered innocent people and were now pursuing two children across the desert. But they had made a mistake by targeting someone under Abdullah's protection. "Hassan, how far to the clinic?" Abdullah asked. "About 50 kilometers, sir." "And our fuel situation?" "Full tank, sir. We can outrun them if necessary." Abdullah made another call to Colonel Al-Zahra. "Colonel, we have immediate pursuit by hostile vehicles. Current location." Abdullah checked his GPS and gave their coordinates. "Send backup to intercept and contact the air unit if available." "Already en route, Your Highness. Helicopter will be overhead in 15 minutes. Abdullah turned to Amara, who was holding Khalil tightly and watching the pursuing vehicles with fear. "Amara, I need you to be very brave right now. Those men cannot hurt you anymore, but we need to get to safety quickly. Can you hold Khalil securely?" The girl nodded, her jaw set with determination that reminded Abdullah of a much older person. "Hassan, lose them," Abdullah ordered. Hassan pressed the accelerator, and the powerful Mercedes surged forward across the desert. The vehicle was designed for exactly this kind of terrain, with advanced suspension and all-wheel drive that could handle sand, rocks, and rough conditions at high speed. Behind them, the old pickup trucks were struggling to keep up, but they knew the desert better than Abdullah's driver did. They began taking shortcuts and using their knowledge of the terrain to try to cut off the Mercedes. "Sir," Hassan said, "they're trying to box us in. There's a narrow pass ahead between two rock formations. If they reach it first, they could block our escape route." Abdullah looked ahead and saw the geographical bottleneck Hassan was referring to. If the kidnappers reached that point before them, they would be trapped. "Can we make it?" Abdullah asked. "It will be close, sir." The chase became a desperate race across the desert, with the Mercedes at full speed, while the pickup trucks used every trick they knew to try to intercept them. Sand and rocks flew behind the vehicles as they pushed their engines to the limit. Amara held Khalil and watched the drama unfold, amazed that this wealthy stranger was risking his own life to protect them from the men who had killed her parents. In the distance, she could hear the sound of a helicopter approaching, and she began to hope that they might actually escape from the nightmare that had consumed her family. The race to the narrow pass would determine whether these two orphaned children would finally find safety, or whether they would fall back into the hands of the killers who were determined to silence them forever. The Mercedes raced across the desert at dangerous speeds, kicking up clouds of sand and dust as Hassan pushed the vehicle to its limits. In the back seat, Abdullah held onto the door handle with one hand, while keeping the other ready to protect Amara and baby Khalil if they hit any obstacles. The narrow pass between the rock formations was now visible ahead, and the two pickup trucks were closing in from different angles, trying to reach the bottleneck before the Mercedes could get through. "They know this area better than we do," Hassan said grimly, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "One of them is going to reach the pass first." Abdullah could see that Hassan was right. The lead pickup truck had taken a more direct route and was now almost parallel to them, racing toward the same destination. The kidnappers in the back of the truck were shouting and pointing guns in their direction, though they were still too far away to shoot accurately. "Sir, they're going to cut us off," Hassan warned. Abdullah made a split-second decision. "Then we don't go through the pass. Take the rocky terrain to the east." "Sir, that area is extremely dangerous. If we damage the vehicle—" "Do it," Abdullah ordered. "These children are not going back to those killers." Hassan yanked the steering wheel to the right, and the Mercedes left the relatively smooth desert floor and began climbing into an area of jagged rocks and steep inclines. The advanced suspension and all-wheel drive system kept them moving, but the ride became violent and bouncing. Amara held Khalil tightly, using her own body to shield him from the worst of the impacts as the vehicle crashed over rocks and through narrow gaps between boulders. "I'm sorry," Abdullah said to her over the noise of the engine and the crash of rocks against the underside of the car. "This is very rough, but we need to get away from those men." "It's okay," Amara replied, though she was clearly frightened. "Just don't let them catch us." The pickup trucks had reached the pass and realized that their prey had escaped in a different direction. Now they were trying to follow the Mercedes into the rocky terrain, but their older vehicles were not equipped for such challenging conditions. One of the trucks got stuck between two large boulders and had to back out and find another route. The second truck was making progress, but was falling behind because it couldn't navigate the obstacles as quickly as the high-tech Mercedes. "The helicopter is close," Abdullah reported, listening to updates from Colonel Al-Zahra through his earpiece. "They should be overhead within 5 minutes." but 5 minutes felt like a lifetime as Hassan maneuvered the Mercedes through increasingly difficult terrain. They were climbing higher into the rocky hills, where the temperature was slightly cooler, but the driving was becoming nearly impossible. "Sir, I can see a plateau ahead," Hassan said. "If we can reach it, the helicopter will have a clear area to land." Abdullah looked ahead and saw the flat area Hassan was referring to. It was still about 2 kilometers away, up a steep and winding path that looked barely wide enough for their vehicle. Behind them, one of the pickup trucks had managed to follow their route and was gaining ground. The kidnappers were now close enough that Abdullah could see their faces, angry, determined men who would stop at nothing to recapture their escaped prisoners. "They're shooting," Hassan said, as the sound of gunfire echoed off the rocks around them. Abdullah ducked down and pulled Amara and Khalil lower in the seat. Bullets struck the rocks near the Mercedes, sending fragments of stone flying through the air. "The armor will protect us," Abdullah told Amara, referring to the bulletproof modifications he had installed in all his vehicles after receiving threats from business rivals. "Stay down." The Mercedes continued climbing toward the plateau while gunfire erupted behind them. The kidnappers were getting desperate and reckless, firing automatic weapons while their driver tried to navigate the treacherous terrain. Then Abdullah heard the sound he had been waiting for, the heavy thrum of helicopter rotors approaching from the north. "This is Colonel Al-Zahra," came the voice through Abdullah's earpiece. "We have visual on your location. I count one pursuing vehicle with multiple armed hostiles. Neutralize the threat," Abdullah replied. "But be careful. There are children in my vehicle." The military helicopter swooped down over the rocky terrain, and Abdullah could see armed soldiers hanging from the open doors. The helicopter's loudspeaker crackled to life, broadcasting a warning in Arabic. "Stop your vehicle immediately and drop your weapons. You are surrounded." The kidnappers in the pickup truck ignored the warning and continued shooting, now directing their fire at the helicopter as well as the Mercedes. That was a fatal mistake. The helicopter's mounted machine gun opened fire with precise bursts, disabling the pickup truck's engine and forcing it to stop between 2 large boulders. The kidnappers scrambled out of the disabled vehicle and took cover behind rocks, but they were now trapped and outnumbered. "Hostile vehicle neutralized," Colonel Al-Zahra reported. "All occupants are pinned down and will be taken into custody." Hassan continued driving toward the plateau, and within a few minutes, they reached the flat area where the helicopter could safely land. The Mercedes came to a stop, and Abdullah finally allowed himself to breathe normally, for the first time since the chase had begun. "Is it over?" Amara asked quietly, still holding Khalil protectively. "Yes, little one," Abdullah said with relief. "The bad men cannot hurt you anymore." As they waited for the helicopter to land, Abdullah looked at these 2 children who had been through so much trauma and suffering. Amara was still alert and protective, making sure Khalil was comfortable despite everything they had just experienced. The baby was sleeping peacefully in his sister's arms, unaware of how close they had all come to disaster. "Amara," Abdullah said gently, "what will happen to you and Khalil now? Do you have other family who can take care of you?" The girl's expression became sad and uncertain. "No," she said quietly. "Mama and Papa came here alone. Our grandparents are in Ethiopia, but they are very old and poor. They cannot take care of us." Abdullah felt his heart breaking for these orphaned children. They had no family, no money, and no safe place to go. In their home country, they would likely end up in an overcrowded orphanage or on the streets. But here in Saudi Arabia, as illegal immigrants, their situation was even more precarious. "Amara, would you like to stay with me?" Abdullah asked impulsively. "I have a big house with many rooms. You and Khalil would be safe there, and you could go to school and have everything you need." Amara looked at Abdullah with surprise and hope. "You would take care of us, even though we are not your family?" "I would be honored to take care of you," Abdullah replied. "You are the bravest little girl I have ever met, and Khalil is lucky to have such a wonderful sister." Tears filled Amara's eyes, but these were tears of relief and gratitude rather than fear and sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving us." The helicopter touched down on the plateau, and Colonel Al-Zahra approached the Mercedes with several soldiers. Abdullah stepped out to meet them while Amara and Khalil remained safely inside the air-conditioned vehicle. "The situation is contained, Your Highness," Colonel Al-Zahra reported. "We have captured 3 armed men who matched the description the girl provided. They will be turned over to the police for investigation." "Excellent work, Colonel. What about the crime scene where the children's parents were killed?" "We will coordinate with the authorities to locate and investigate that site as well. The men we captured will face charges for murder, kidnapping, and human trafficking." Abdullah nodded with satisfaction. Justice would be served for the terrible crimes committed against Amara's family. "Sir," Colonel Al-Zahra continued, "there is one more thing. Inspector Mahmoud wants to speak with the children about what they witnessed." but he understands they have been through tremendous trauma and will be very gentle with the questioning. The children will cooperate fully, Abdullah said, but only after they have received medical attention and had time to recover. Their welfare comes first. As the helicopter prepared to transport them to Dr. Al-Mansouri's clinic, Abdullah looked back at Amara and Khalil through the Mercedes window. These two children had lost everything: their parents, their home, their sense of safety. But they had also gained something precious: a new family who would love and protect them. Abdullah realized that this encounter in the desert had changed his life as much as it had changed theirs. He had always been generous with his wealth, donating to charities and supporting worthy causes. But he had never experienced the profound satisfaction of directly saving lives and providing a home for children who desperately needed one. As they flew toward the clinic in the helicopter, with Amara and Khalil safely secured in medical seats, Abdullah made a silent promise to these brave children and to their murdered parents. He would give Amara and Khalil the best possible life, filled with love, education, and opportunities they never could have imagined. The nightmare was over, but their new life together was just beginning. 3 weeks after the rescue in the desert, Amara stood in the doorway of the most beautiful bedroom she had ever seen. The room was larger than the entire apartment her family had shared, with soft pink walls, a bed covered in silk sheets, and windows that looked out over Abdullah's magnificent gardens and swimming pool. Dr. Al-Mansouri had kept Amara and Khalil in his clinic for 5 days, treating them for severe dehydration, malnutrition, and various injuries from their ordeal in the desert. Both children had recovered remarkably well, though Amara still had nightmares about the night her parents were killed. Abdullah had visited them every day at the clinic, bringing toys for Khalil and books for Amara. He had been amazed to discover that despite her young age and traumatic experiences, Amara was incredibly intelligent and eager to learn. She spoke 3 languages: Amharic, Arabic, and English, and had taught herself to read by studying discarded newspapers and magazines. "This is your room," Abdullah said gently, placing his hand on Amara's shoulder as she stared in wonder at her new surroundings. "Everything here belongs to you now." Amara walked slowly into the room, touching the soft fabrics and examining the beautiful furniture. In one corner was a desk with paper, colored pencils, and books. In another corner was a rocking chair next to a crib where baby Khalil would sleep. "It's too beautiful," Amara said quietly. "I don't deserve such nice things." Abdullah knelt down so he was at eye level with the 10-year-old girl. "Amara, you deserve everything beautiful in the world," he said firmly. "You are brave, intelligent, and loving. Any family would be lucky to have you as their daughter." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm not really your daughter. I'm just a girl you found in the desert. You are my daughter now," Abdullah said with conviction. "Not because of blood, but because of choice. I choose to love you and Khalil as my own children, and I hope that someday you will choose to love me as your father." Amara threw her arms around Abdullah's neck and hugged him tightly. "I already do," she whispered. "You saved our lives. You are the kindest man I have ever known." Abdullah felt his heart swell with love and pride. In just 3 weeks, this remarkable little girl had become the center of his world. He had never been married or had children of his own, focusing instead on building his business empire. But Amara and Khalil had shown him what he had been missing: the joy and purpose that came from loving and caring for others. Over the following days, Abdullah introduced Amara and Khalil to their new life. The palace had a staff of 30 people, including housekeepers, gardeners, cooks, and security personnel. Everyone had been instructed to treat the children with the utmost care and respect. Amara was initially overwhelmed by the luxury and attention, but she adapted quickly. She was especially fascinated by Abdullah's library, which contained thousands of books in multiple languages. Abdullah hired a private tutor, Ms. Sarah, a kind English woman who had experience teaching children from diverse backgrounds. "Amara is exceptional," Ms. Sarah reported to Abdullah after her first week of lessons. "Her reading comprehension is at a high school level, and her mathematical abilities are remarkable. With proper education, she could achieve anything she sets her mind to." Abdullah wasn't surprised. He had observed Amara's intelligence and curiosity from the beginning, but he was also concerned about the emotional trauma she had experienced. "How is she handling the psychological aspects of her ordeal?" Abdullah asked. "She's remarkably resilient," Ms. Sarah replied, "but she has nightmares, and she's extremely protective of Khalil. She checks on him constantly and becomes anxious if he's out of her sight for too long." Abdullah had noticed this as well. Amara rarely let Khalil out of her sight, and she insisted on helping with all aspects of his care. She had appointed herself as his primary guardian, even though there were professional nannies available to help. "She feels responsible for his safety," Abdullah realized. "She's been his protector for so long that she doesn't know how to let others help." Abdullah decided to address this issue directly. One evening, as Amara was feeding Khalil his dinner, Abdullah sat down beside them. "Amara, can I ask you something?" Abdullah said. "Of course, Papa," Amara replied. She had begun calling him Papa a week earlier, which filled Abdullah with joy every time he heard it. "Do you trust me to take care of you and Khalil?" Amara looked surprised by the question. "Yes, Papa. You saved our lives. Then why won't you let the nannies help you with Khalil? Why do you feel like you have to do everything yourself?" Amara was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "Because Mama told me to take care of him," she said finally. "If something happens to Khalil while I'm not watching, it will be my fault." Abdullah understood now. This little girl was carrying a burden that no child should have to bear. "Amara, your mama asked you to take care of Khalil when you were in danger and had no one else to help," Abdullah explained gently. "But now you have a whole family to help you. I am here to take care of both of you. The nannies are here to help. Ms. Sarah is here to teach you. You don't have to carry all the responsibility by yourself anymore." Amara looked at baby Khalil, who was giggling and reaching for his bottle. "But what if something bad happens again?" she asked. "What if the bad men come back?" "They can't come back," Abdullah assured her. "They are in prison, and this house has the best security in the country. Colonel Alzara and his team make sure that no one can hurt you here." "But what if you decide you don't want us anymore?" Amara asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if we're too much trouble?" Abdullah felt his heart break at the vulnerability in her voice. This child had lost everything once and was terrified it would happen again. "Amara, look at me," Abdullah said, taking her small hands in his. "I will never, ever abandon you or Khalil. You are my children now, and that means forever. No matter what happens, no matter what troubles we face, we will face them together as a family." Amara studied Abdullah's face, looking for any sign of doubt or deception. What she saw was complete sincerity and love. "Promise?" she whispered. "I promise," Abdullah said solemnly. "And to prove it, I want to show you something." Abdullah led Amara to his study, where he pulled out a folder of legal documents. "These are adoption papers," Abdullah explained. "They make you and Khalil officially my children under the law. Your names will be Amara al-Rashid and Khalil al-Rashid. You will have the same rights and protections as any child born into my family." Amara stared at the documents with amazement. "We would really be al-Rashids?" "If you want to be," Abdullah said. "It's your choice." "Yes," Amara said immediately. "Yes, I want to be your daughter officially." The adoption process took several months to complete, involving interviews with social workers, court hearings, and extensive background checks. Throughout it all, Abdullah was patient and supportive, helping Amara understand each step of the process. During this time, Amara flourished in her new environment. She excelled in her studies with Ms. Sarah, learning advanced mathematics, science, literature, and history. She also began taking Arabic lessons to improve her fluency in her new country's language. Baby Khalil grew stronger and healthier every day. He was now walking and beginning to speak his first words, calling Abdullah Baba and Amara Mara. The trauma of his early months seemed to have no lasting effects, largely because of the loving care he received from his sister and new father. Abdullah found that fatherhood came naturally to him. He loved reading bedtime stories to Amara, teaching Khalil to walk in the garden, and hearing about their daily adventures and discoveries. His business associates were amazed by the transformation in their colleague. The ruthless businessman had become a devoted father who talked constantly about his children's accomplishments. "You've changed," his friend and business partner, Prince Faisal, observed during a meeting. "You're happier than I've ever seen you." "I never knew what I was missing," Abdullah replied. "Money and success are meaningless without people you love to share them with." The legal adoption was finalized on a sunny morning in November. Abdullah, Amara, and Khalil stood in the judge's chambers as the official documents were signed, making them a legal family. "Congratulations," Judge Al-Mahmoud said with a smile. "You are now officially the Al-Rashid family." Amara hugged Abdullah tightly, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Thank you, Papa," she said. "Thank you for giving us a real family again." "Thank you for making me a father," Abdullah replied. "You have given my life more meaning than I ever thought possible." That evening, Abdullah hosted a celebration dinner for the new Al-Rashid family. The dining room was decorated with flowers and balloons, and the chef had prepared all of Amara's favorite foods. Colonel Al-Zara, Dr. Al-Mansouri, Ms. Sarah, and other people who had helped the children were invited to share in the celebration. As they sat around the table, with Khalil in his high chair happily eating cake with his hands, and Amara beaming with joy beside Abdullah, everyone present understood that they were witnessing something beautiful and rare. A family created not by chance, but by choice, love, and the determination to turn tragedy into triumph. Amara had lost her birth parents to violence and hatred, but she had gained a father who would love and protect her for the rest of her life. Khalil would grow up surrounded by luxury and opportunity, but more importantly, he would grow up knowing that he was cherished and valued. And Abdullah had discovered that the greatest fortune he could ever possess was not measured in money or possessions, but in the love of two remarkable children who had taught him what it truly meant to be a family. 5 years had passed since that fateful day in the desert when Abdullah found Amara and baby Khalil dying of thirst in the sand. Now, 15-year-old Amara al-Rashid stood at the podium of the United Nations headquarters in New York City, addressing world leaders about the global refugee crisis and human trafficking. 5 years ago, I was a 10-year-old girl watching my parents be murdered by criminals who trafficked in human misery, Amara said, her voice clear and confident as it carried through the packed auditorium. Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as someone who has been given the opportunity to speak for those who have no voice. In the audience, Abdullah watched his daughter with immense pride. Amara had grown into a remarkable young woman, intelligent, compassionate, and committed to using her platform to help others who faced the same dangers she had once encountered. Sitting beside Abdullah was 6-year-old Khalil, now a healthy, happy child who spoke 4 languages and was already showing signs of the same exceptional intelligence his sister possessed. Khalil had no memories of their traumatic early years, but he understood that his family had a special responsibility to help children who were suffering. My father, Sheikh Abdullah al-Rashid, saved our lives that day in the desert, Amara continued her speech. But more importantly, he showed us that love and family are not determined by blood or nationality, but by choice and commitment to one another. Over the past 5 years, the al-Rashid family had become known throughout the Middle East and beyond for their humanitarian work. Abdullah had established the Desert Angels Foundation, an organization dedicated to combating human trafficking, providing sanctuary for refugees, and supporting orphan children. The foundation operated safe houses in 12 countries, provided legal aid to trafficking victims, and had helped rescue over 2,000 children from dangerous situations. Amara had become the foundation's youngest spokesperson, sharing her story at conferences and meetings around the world. We cannot end human trafficking and the exploitation of vulnerable families without addressing the root causes, Amara told the UN Assembly. Poverty, lack of education, and desperation make people vulnerable to criminals who promise them safety but deliver only suffering. Khalil, who had been listening intently to his sister's speech, leaned over to whisper to Abdullah, "Baba, when I grow up, I want to help people like Amara does," Khalil said in Arabic. "You already help people, my son," Abdullah replied quietly. "Every time you show kindness to others, every time you share what you have, you are making the world better." After Amara's speech, the al-Rashid family was invited to a private reception with other humanitarian leaders and diplomats. Amara moved confidently through the crowd, discussing policy proposals and sharing insights about refugee protection with people who had decades more experience than her 15 years would suggest. "Your daughter is extraordinary," said Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the head of UNICEF. "She has an intuitive understanding of these issues that comes from lived experience, but she also has the intellectual sophistication to propose practical solutions. She has always been remarkable," Abdullah replied. "Even when I found her in the desert, dying of thirst but still protecting her baby brother, I could see that she was special." Dr. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "We would like to offer Amara a position as a youth ambassador with UNICEF. She could help us develop programs specifically designed to prevent child trafficking and support rescued victims." Abdullah looked over at Amara, who was deep in conversation with a group of European diplomats about establishing new safe corridors for refugee families. "I'll discuss it with her," Abdullah said. "But knowing Amara, she'll want to know exactly how she can make the biggest impact." Later that evening, back in their hotel suite, the al-Rashid family sat together reviewing the day's events. Khalil was playing with educational toys that Abdullah had brought from Saudi Arabia, while Amara worked on her laptop, drafting follow-up emails to the contacts she had made at the UN. "Amara," Abdullah said, "Dr. Rodriguez offered you a position with UNICEF. What do you think about that?" Amara looked up from her computer with interest. "What kind of position?" Abdullah explained the youth ambassador role and the opportunities it would provide to influence international policy on child protection. "That sounds amazing," Amara said thoughtfully. "But I don't want to just be a symbol or a spokesperson. I want to do real work that actually saves children." "What kind of work do you have in mind?" Abdullah asked. Amara had clearly been thinking about this for some time. "I want to go to university and study international law and social work. Then I want to work directly with at-risk children, not just talk about them at conferences." Abdullah wasn't surprised by Amara's response. Despite her young age, She had always been focused on practical action rather than symbolic gestures. You could do both, Abdullah suggested. The UNICEF position could help you learn about international systems while you're studying, and it would give you access to resources and networks that could help you be more effective in the future. Amara considered this. Could I still work directly with children? Could I visit the refugee camps and safe houses? Not just write reports about them? I'm sure that could be arranged, Abdullah said. Especially if we make it a condition of your involvement. Khalil looked up from his toys and joined the conversation. Amara, if you work with UNICEF, will you still live with us? He asked with concern. Amara immediately went to sit beside her little brother and put her arm around him. Of course I'll still live with you, she assured him. We're a family, and families stay together. No matter what work I do, you and Baba will always be the most important people in my life. Abdullah felt a familiar surge of love and pride watching his children's bond with each other. Amara's protective instincts toward Khalil were as strong as ever, but now they were balanced with confidence that their family was secure and permanent. Speaking of family, Abdullah said, I have something I want to discuss with both of you. Amara and Khalil both turned to give him their full attention. I've been thinking about expanding our family, Abdullah said carefully. There are many children in our safe houses who need permanent homes. I would like to consider adopting more children who need families. Amara's face lit up with excitement. Really? You want to adopt more kids? Only if you and Khalil are comfortable with it, Abdullah said. You two will always be my first children, and nothing will ever change that. But if we can provide loving homes for more children who need them? Yes, Amara said immediately. I think that's a wonderful idea. There are so many kids who need families. Khalil nodded enthusiastically. I want more brothers and sisters. It would be fun to have a bigger family. Abdullah smiled at their responses. He had known they would be supportive, but their immediate enthusiasm confirmed his decision. I was thinking we might start with 2 children, a brother and sister who are currently in our Damascus safe house. They're from Yemen, and they've been through experiences similar to what you faced. Amara's expression became serious and determined. How old are they? What do they need? The girl is 8, and her brother is 3, Abdullah explained. Their parents were killed in the war, and they've been refugees for over a year. The girl has been protecting her little brother, just like you protected Khalil. When can we meet them? Amara asked. I thought we could visit the safe house next month, Abdullah said. If you connect with them, and if they're comfortable with us, we can begin the adoption process. Khalil clapped his hands with excitement. I can teach the little boy how to play with my toys, and I can help the girl feel safe, Amara added. I know what it's like to be scared and responsible for a little brother. 3 months later, the Al-Rashid family had grown by 2 members. Layla and Omar Youssef had become Layla and Omar al-Rashid, joining their new family with the same legal protections and emotional support that Amara and Khalil had received. The adoption had gone smoothly because Amara had been able to connect with 8-year-old Layla in a way that few adults could. She understood Layla's fears, her protective instincts toward her little brother, and her difficulty trusting that their new situation was permanent. It's okay to be scared, Amara had told Layla during one of their early conversations. I was scared too when Papa first found us, but he keeps his promises, and he will never abandon us. Now, the expanded Al-Rashid family lived in a specially renovated wing of Abdullah's palace that had been designed to accommodate multiple children while maintaining the close family atmosphere they all valued. Abdullah had also established a tradition of family meetings where all the children could express their opinions about household decisions, foundation activities, and even potential new adoptions. He wanted them to feel like partners in building their family rather than passive recipients of his generosity. Being wealthy means we have responsibilities, Abdullah often told his children. We must use our advantages to help those who have fewer opportunities. All 4 children had embraced this philosophy. Amara continued her work with international organizations while excelling in her advanced studies. Khalil, now 7, had started a project to collect toys and books for refugee children. 6-year-old Layla helped translate materials into Arabic for new arrivals at the safe houses. And even 4-year-old Omar contributed by drawing pictures to include in care packages for children in crisis situations. On the 5th anniversary of Amara and Khalil's rescue, the family returned to the place in the desert where Abdullah had first found them. It was now marked with a small memorial to their parents, Desta and Mehran, and to all the victims of human trafficking who had lost their lives. Mama and Papa would be proud of the people you've become, Abdullah told Amara and Khalil as they stood beside the memorial. They would be proud of you too, Baba, Amara replied. You gave us a life they could never have imagined, and you taught us to use it to help others. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sand dunes in shades of gold and orange, the Al-Rashid family stood together, no longer defined by tragedy and loss, but by love, purpose, and hope for the future. Abdullah looked at his 4 children and realized that the greatest fortune he had ever accumulated was not measured in money or property, but in the trust of these remarkable young people who had chosen to call him their father. And in the distance, across the vast expanse of the desert, other families were beginning their own journeys towards safety and new beginnings, guided by the work of the Desert Angels Foundation and the legacy of love that had grown from a chance encounter on one scorching day when a billionaire stopped to help a dying child. The desert had taken much from Amara and Khalil, but it had also given them something precious, a family built on choice, commitment, and the unshakable belief that love could triumph over the darkest circumstances.